What we have here, this is my 1957 Chevy. The quickest time it's been is 5.95 seconds. It's been 247 mile an hour. Here we are in what we call the third shed in the Team Bray workshop complex. We store some of these classic cars that belong to the team.
It's #1 SR in the world, #2 4-cylinder in the world as well, and it's #1 4-cylinder in Australia.
These cars also use a turbo 400 automatic, and you know, that is the main differences in the car mechanically. Externally, they're supposed to look like the race cars, but there is some real differences under the hood. Here's one of the bullets out of our top door slammers. Now these are based on a 426 Chrysler Hemi. Way back in 1963, there was a bit of a confusion out there with the police forces in the United States. They actually wanted a more powerful car. So they put it to the Ford, GM and Chrysler and said, make us a powerful car we can catch all these hot rodders. Chrysler won the deal, and then that's where we got the 426 Chrysler Hemi from. The main thing they had going for them was the Hemi head. They had a valve here, the inlet here, the outlet there, and the spark plug in the middle. Perfect combination. Now these engines nowadays obviously are billet. They're machined out of one chunk of aluminium. Other than the size of the studs, you can take a head off a 1963 Chrysler and you could bolt it straight into here and it would work. You could put a crankshaft straight into here and it would work. The variants that we use in the door slammers nowadays, there's two main combinations and it's to do with bore size. This one here is a 4.467 bore. It's sort of the biggest you can go. If you go to 4.5 inch bore, the cylinder walls get a bit thin and get a bit move around when you start getting a bit hot. And the other bore is 4.375, which was the stable bore for drag racing for many, many years until they found out that you know, bigger bore, better flow in the heads and stuff. So as the heads developed. Crankshafts, you can have pretty much anything you want. This one's a 4150 crank, which is 4.150 stroke. And you know, the 4150 crank and the 4.467 bore makes it a 521 cubic inch engine. Seems to be a combination that a lot of people have settled on here, United States, everywhere. It seems to be a combination, has a short stroke basically, comparatively with what the Hemi was, and has a nice big bore, so the motor can rev up real high. Obviously you've got a big arm, like a big crankshaft with a lot of stroke. Once you start getting up into 8, 9, 10,000, 10,500 revs, you've got a great big crankshaft swinging right out each side, and that causes a lot of trouble. So basically the shorter the stroke, the more friendly it is on high RPM, and the bigger the bore, the more friendly it is on head flow. These are the pistons and conrods that we use in the motor. Obviously again, there's a heap of brands that you can use. These are JE pistons and GRP conrods. Go into the billet motor, the billet heads, the billet conrods. And when the technology came out in CNC equipment to actually manufacture all this stuff, it was a big step forward in strength and performance for all the drag racing. Everyone sort of selects their own compression ratio. With a supercharger on top, the compression ratio is obviously greatly increased because you're pumping the air on top of the motor. Generally, if you run this engine at about 10.5 to 1, static compression, going through the lights with the supercharger and the engine on 10,500, you're looking closer to 30 to 1. That's why the conrods have to be so big and strong and the whole inside of the motor has to be so beefy. The oiling system is incredibly close to what it was in 1963, except nowadays we actually scavenge the sump. So there's two oil pumps, one's coming from the engine, conventionally pumping into the engine to give it oil pressure, the other one's scavenging out of the sump and putting it back in the tank. That's pretty much how it is. One of the myths that in drag racing, and then probably a lot from the public and maybe even you know, other races, is that we don't use the 2550 Castrol Edge off the shelf in our race motors. The fact is we do. And over the years we've had a few smart asses walked up to the side of the car in the pit and they've gone, no, we bet you that special blend that Castrol make you. We said, well, if it's so special, why don't you go down to Supercheap, Repco, Autobarn, wherever, go to the local retail outlet, buy us this amount. I mean, we made sure it was a good couple of $100 worth too, I can tell you, and bring it back here, we'll run it in the motors. And they're, oh, yeah, bet you don't, bet you don't. So they've gone down a few times, they've actually gone down there, they've bought it, they've come back, and they said, here it is. We've actually let them tip it in the motor, gone out and done the runs. They've come back and they said, well, you know, we didn't think that you would have been running it. And I said, that's all right, mate, now you're $200 out of pocket, thank you very much. But it does prove the point. We have always run the Castrol Edge in these engines, and that's what lubricates the motors, and we found to be excellent over the years. Obviously, we pull these engines apart a lot for maintenance, and they've been built to pull apart and check because they're under so much stress. So if you have a look at all the componentry in this motor, the crankshaft journals, the cylinder walls, side of the piston, and the bearings here. What it is, this engine looks like it's just been, we're ready to assemble it. This engine's actually done nearly 10 passes, 9 or 10 passes, at about 3,500 horsepower, and this is what it comes out like. Very little even marks on the side of the pistons. The bores are in perfect condition. The bearings are perfect. The crankshaft journals look brand new. The motor just gets reassembled now. It gets cleaned, reassembled, put back out there with all the same components back in it. Hopefully we go into another half a dozen or more. Another thing that we do with the Castrol Edge is we leave it in all day. A lot of guys will rip their oil out of their cars after each pass. And we leave it in all day. We do 6-7 runs in the weekend on the same sump. Now, one of the things when I first got involved with Castrol, I was a farm boy, you know, I used to tip oil out of the boxes and straight into the tractors and stuff. And then, you know, I was racing, I used to put the oil in the cars. And one of the things that I remember clearly and something that really sort of amazed me at the time was that when I started getting involved with Castrol Technical and we were testing different products in the cars, back in them days it was called GP50. And the technical team, you know, I had some problems with the cars. One of the things I had problems with was a bit of rust in the inside of the motor when I pulled it apart. Another thing was the roller lifters used to wear way quicker than what they probably should have, I thought. So I took the problems to the technical team. Those guys said, well, you know, this is what's missing out of the oil. They made sure that they were in. They were actually already in the GP50 at the time, and the technical team put them out there. We went out, solved those problems overnight in seconds. And then when we went to, we didn't just stop there at the engines, we moved into transmissions. But one of the biggest things biggest increases in our performance actually come from diff oil. So what happened is the technical team developed me a very, what I considered low viscosity oil, and mile an hour increase in the car by about 10 or 15. I think in the late 90s, we ran 245 mile an hour, probably 10 years before anybody else did. And it was only because of the fact people got an idea of the oil that we're using in the diff was the trick, and nowadays it's a staple in the industry. So that's why I think over the years we've relied heavily on Castrol, their testing and their lubrication in all our engines. I can stand here and say I've never done a run in a top door slammer that wasn't lubricated by Castrol, so pretty proud of that as well.
What we have here is the heads. Other than the camshaft, these are the most important part of the car. What you see here, probably the best you can buy in our industry, the rocker gear, the heads, they're all good for up to 4,000 to 4,500 horsepower. We flow it. The heads are probably 99% of the thing that keeps the motor running, because if I tell you now, if one of these little baby valves fall in and whack one of them pistons, it's a day over. The rocker gear, when you've got a valve spring at around the 500 pound of the seat, it's about 1,300 pound when the cam's got it open. So you've got a dirty old push rod and a poor little lifter holding that thing open to let the air in and back out so the motor can make all that horsepower that we keep talking about. The valve train really is probably one of the top things of our motor. The valve size is probably where it's at. Because we run a blower on top of the motor and have a ton of boost going in there, you need the biggest possible valve you can have in a motor. So our valves are probably nearly 3 times bigger than any road car. So our exhaust valve is probably the same size as a street car's intake valve, and our intake valve's pretty much the size of a Coke can. So if you can fit a Coke can in your port, you're doing pretty good. But I can tell you now, in drag racing, bigger is better, because we need airflow. When you've got 60 odd pound on top of a valve seat, you need to be able to flow it. So if the heads don't flow it, air's nothing, no good to us. 15 years ago, lubrication in the heads probably wasn't so good, because if you broke it, you just fix it and come back out. Nowadays, we look for reliability. And with the Castrol Edge range, they make sure that our push rods, our lifters, and our camshaft, our valves and everything stay perfectly lubricated, so the wear and tear, because I don't know if you'd noticed, but the size of the valve at 10,000 RPM, if the valve stem ain't lubricated to the right amount, it will season the head and your day is over. There's no use having a big engine room just for having billet Hemis everywhere. As you can tell, we'll play with any V8 you can bring in, small blocks, big blocks, anything. But one love I have in life is 4 cylinders and turbocharged 6 cylinders. If I can fit a turbocharge on something at 140 cubic inches and make around the 1,500 horsepower, which also makes me the world's fastest SR20, I'm pretty happy with that. So, and I build that here in this workshop, the same place I build all these Hemis that make probably 3,500 horsepower. So behind me here, you have that's a dirty old stinking SR20 head that I've probably made around 1,000 horsepower with, and then you got a 2J head. So like I said, if it can make horsepower, I'll own it and enjoy it.
Well, here we are back in the front room at Team Bray Racing. Got a lot of memories in here. This is the car that cemented my relationship with Castrol in 1988-89, and in 2013, that makes 25 years we've been using Castrol products in all our race cars, our transporters, and we've had access to the technology, which has helped our careers move forward. This car's probably done just under 2,000 runs down the racetrack. We used to run it up and down the coast here in the Wild Bunch and stuff. I did just under 200 mile an hour in this. I used to do it 8 or 10 times a weekend and did it for years and years and years. But after sitting in a state-of-the-art space frame race car like we run nowadays, and then getting back in here, boy, in them days I must have had some kahunas. So I hope you enjoyed the tour of Team Bray's workshop. And as the horsepower on these drag racing engines increases, and as the temperature inside the engine, the stress on the components, and the pressure on the components inside the engine increases, I'm sure Castrol Edge will continue to evolve over the next 25 years, just like it has over the last 25. Anyway, we've got things to do, races to go to. We'll catch you later.